So just to relax. I mean, it's, gosh, that I just sort of wearing myself with my talk, really trying to listen to Vajra. And also just really how lovely it is to be here, actually. Just how lovely it is to be here with everybody. And I really felt that on Sangha night, the first Sangha night we had back here. I really felt that on the first Sangha night that we had back here on Tuesday. So I'm just, if you want to lie down, please do. And I'm going to kind of repeat this in the course of the day. We've started, I mean, Vajra's said about ritual and, the importance of Padmasambhava as the magician and the magic. It is the magic of ritual, isn't it? And we've already, we're very much we've already created this ritual space. We are creating, we are co-creating, and with everybody at home, we're co-creating, we're finding our way with this mixed medium. So, yeah. So I'm going to speak about Padmasambhava more as the Alchemist, which, I mean, a few people here know that's something, a medium that really speaks to me and has done for a while now. And I'm just really struck, actually, with the way that Padmasambhava weaves into the alchemy and the alchemical process. Yes, and as with anything really in life, with anybody, with all of you, I'm always interested about where people have come from, those conditions. And of course, I am going to say a little bit about Padmasambhava's, the way he came in, which wasn't the way, we all come in. But he was a part, we are all affected by our particular conditions. And he came into northern India and then Tibet at a time when the shamanistic culture was what was there, and hence all the shaman, which is very much, you could also call him a shaman magician. It is about that contact with the kind of unknown, the sort of spirits of other worlds. And of course, the healing of that time, and thankfully to a certain extent in our time as well, is through herbs. So hence there's lots of different herbs here on the shrine. And in the course of the day, if you feel comfortable with it, I invite you to just come, and there's so many rich smells here. Just come and feel this, feel this shrine, feel this space. Just feel into it. That's the invitation. So this important aspect of shamanism, animism, this whole thing of we are of one with the worlds. There's not this separation that Vajra was talking about. That I love this way that, so that's of everything, that's of both the living world and what we call so-called, inanimate objects. So I love this thing that James Hillman says, which is, it's like, well, this whole thing of, shall I sit in that chair or shall I sit in that chair? That whole thing when you enter a space. And it's that thing of, the idea of, well, does that chair want me to sit in it? It's kind of another way, isn't it, that brings in, just makes us all much more connected rather than that kind of doing it to sort of way of thinking. So I'm gonna give you a little whistle-stop tour of alchemy and the importance of colour. And for me, actually, creating the shrine was lovely because I have such a connection with the reds and the golds. I'll say a bit more about that in relation to Padmasambhava. So what Bertrand mentioned, the descent, and the first stage in the alchemical process is the nigredo, the blackening, the descent. It's going into our own underworld, sort of facing our own demons, but in a way, there's kind of facing your demons in a very active way, but the nigredo is actually, it's a complete loss of hope. But what I love about the alchemy is that the nigredo is seen as a hard-won state. To really kind of let go into that is prized. And there is no sort of sense in that. I'm sure we've all been there to an extent, if not to a large extent. I know I have myself where we're in something and you just can't see the way forward. So that's the nigredo, blackening. And then there's this, we're moving through the blue transit. So there's something is easing, but it's still very introverted. It's that phrase of only me by the fire. It's very kind of internal, but there's something being consumed by the blue flame. The darkness is being consumed slowly by the blue flame. Yes, and then there is this move, perhaps, and I can't emphasize, I'm sure we're all aware, in terms of the spiritual path, there is no linear process here, and it's just like that in alchemy. There's no, if I just do this and that will happen and then that will happen. It's not like that. It's not like that. And we might, as we embark on the spiritual path, we often, we think, and I think that is part of the process. But there is something then that comes in that takes us there, it feels to me. So there's the move towards what's called the albedo, or the silvering, the whitening, the lunar sort of awareness. And it's interesting to know, it's why I put on a silver skirt today, because it's interesting that a silver does often have a blue hue to it, so this whole thing of the colours are all part of one another. Yes, and again, the process is it's illuminating, but it's still quite internal. And heightened. It's like you're at the top of the mountain. and you're firing your ideas, your reflections, you're firing. And there we could, you say that the Buddhist enlightenment, the awareness of enlightenment is a silvered awareness. And then, of course, Buddha's, his sort of reflection when he first got enlightened of how am I going to communicate this? How am I going to possibly communicate this? And then that decision, really, as I see it, it's like that decision, I have to communicate this. There is bringing this into the world. And the next sort of stage in the alchemical process, really important stage, is the yellowing. So it's that, it's the move away from the internal to the external, out into the world, the importance of the world. And personally, I can really identify in this point in my life with the yellowing. It's for me personally, it's that moving from the I, the I to the we. And it is, it's, so another sort of analogy really, is the Buddha and the monks is the alms round. It feels like, the begging bowl, every day the yellowing, going out into the world, an important part of practice. And Padmasambhava is famous for meditating in cremation grounds, which was, I think it's always good to sort of, it was actually what the shamans did. That's what they did. It's a big part, going into the cremation grounds. It's kind of facing your fears, and it sort of feels to me like the cremation grounds are this sort of yellowing process, aren't they? This is death and decay. This is facing, as a human being, facing our own death. And the sort of sulfuric element of the yellowing sort of impedes that detachment that can come with, that albedo stage or the enlightened stage, you might say. And without the sulfur, there's this sort of knitting together in sulfur. Without the sulfur, there isn't the healing of the wounds. And I hope, that there's so many healing herbs here present today. There's kind of a healing. And we're coming out of, we're coming out of a stage of something. That's all we can say. And I think for all of us, I know for me personally, it's been a massive process. And part of today is a reflection on, where we find ourselves coming out in this kind of, coming out and it's not really safe. There's all of that in there. There's all of that. So there's this healing that needs to happen with the yellowing. The healing, I think the healing is in the yellowing, and I think there's a stage of life. The yellowing equates with a stage of life where we really have to turn towards, turn towards those things that have kind of always been there, that are sort of perhaps holding us back in a way. Not that there's really anywhere to get to, at the same time, you know, but there are certain obstructions, aren't there? There's things that come up, and yes, and then, which in fact, it's been this whole kind of process for me about thinking about Padmasambhava for today, and Padmasambhava as the alchemist, because there's been sort of a kind of thing really about, oh, so the final stage of the alchemical process. So the alchemist is sort of turning base metals into gold. The gold of alchemy is actually called the rubedo, the reddening. So interesting, the gold red, you know, there's they're synonymous. And in my own sort of thing about reading a lot over the last few years really about alchemy has been, it's not really much about the reddening. It's not really much about the reddening, final stage. And somehow, you know, just thinking about Padmasambhava is that he is a representation of the reddening. Yeah, the rubedo. Yeah, so just to say a bit about that, because there's so much kind of correlation, I think, between the Tantra, so Padmasambhava as a tantric guru, and the rubedo, final stage of the alchemical process. So I think both represent that there's the inseparability of the visible and the invisible, of this world and the other worlds. There's the inseparable other worlds, the inseparability of psyche and logos, the inseparability of us, you know, me and you and me and this wood, and you know, that inseparability that we so need to contact for the healing of our worlds. Some of us more than others. Yeah. So Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava. I've sort of found it a bit of a practice in writing the talks. It's sort of each time writing Padmasambhava's name in full. You know, it's a bit of a sort of practice like myself. Sometimes you wish these names were a bit shorter, don't you? The importance of him as tantric guru, you know, and so the relationship of a tantric guru and disciple is one of, you know, someone who is seeking to be healed, a samaya bond, someone who is seeking healing from the tantric guru. And of course, that healing will often come in ways that we don't really expect. It can be a completely different journey to what we expected. Yeah, and the Tantra, you know, is these magical, mystical texts. We're going to have readings today that they just take you into a whole other world, don't they? The Tantra, the Vajrayana, a whole other world. yeah. So, yeah, the rubedo, the red meat, you know, I'm struck also that the red meat is an amalgamation of all colours. You know, the black is in there, blue, the silver, there's green in the alchemical process. They're all the yellow, obviously. They're all in there. They're all in there. Yeah, I just think it's. I just want to say a little bit about Padmasambhava's birth and well, the thing that he's famous for, which is bringing Buddhism to Tibet. So interestingly, Padmasambhava, well, he sprung out of a lotus. Padma literally means, you know, lotus born. And but he sprung out as an 8-year-old child, you know, which I just think, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? An 8-year-old child. I'm not quite sure. I'm not really going to say anything about that. I'm just, you know, I just find that really interesting. And he in northern India, this was, and he was well, the king of that land found out about this child sprung from the lotus, and was childless, and came with his entourage to meet the child and asked him 3 questions. And there's this thing about threes, isn't there, in Buddhism, and in other sort of traditions as well, the importance of 3. I mean, they've said, wasn't it, that if you ask the Buddha a question, you know, 3 times, he would always give you an answer. And it wouldn't necessarily be the answer you wanted to hear. So the first question was, who are your parents? And Padmasambhava, little boy Padmasambhava, answered, my mother is great compassion, and my father is the vastness of wisdom. And the second question, what nourishes you? I just think this is fantastic. I am nourished on perplexity. I'm nourished on perplexity. And why are you here? I've come out of compassion for all living beings. Yeah, it always happens when you least expect it, doesn't it? You get moved. So this compassion, for all living beings. I suspect that's why we're all here. Yeah. And so important at this time, isn't it? So, so important. So I just want to say a little bit about this particular emanation. I mean, there's thousands of emanations of Padmasambhava. And this one, you know, the red, well, it's not so much a red cap, it's like a red crown, isn't it? But this is the, you know, the monk stroke tantric guru. and he's holding the three tantric attributes of, very importantly, the Vajra, and for me, since finding out about the Vajra, however many years ago, the thing that always stays in my mind is on the central axis of the Vajra, that it is, the conditions and the unconditions are on the same axis. This world and other world is right here. It's right here, right now. This is it. This is it. It's just how we see it. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, there's something not so much with the more crown-like red hat, but he also has an emanation with a little red cap, which brings him. Brings him as the ordinary. There's something both extraordinary and ordinary about Padmasambhava. And I think he's different in that sense from other Buddha figures, and there is something quite worldly, and there is evidence, of him being an actual historical figure, an actual magician, wizard, shaman figure. Yes, and so he also has the skull cap, which is filled with amrita, the nectar, the ambrosia, it's red in colour, it's colour of blood, it's life-giving. It's what the smoky Buddha has, and the wheel of life going into the hell realms, because it's the only thing that the hungry ghosts can actually take in, can actually give them sustenance. It's the only thing. Yes, and it's the nectar of the great bliss. Yeah, and then the adept staff, the tridents. And I was saying earlier, the importance, and there's just not enough time to bring everything in, but the importance, the importance of Yeshe Sokyo, who friends, fellow sort of accomplished Buddha in her own right, consorts of Padmasambhava. And yeah, there's more to be said about her on another occasion. But one of the stories in terms of the tridents is that she was travelling with Padmasambhava on one occasion, and it must have been, I'm imagining at that time it may have been difficult, for women to go certain places, and anyway, he was somewhere where she couldn't go, so she transformed into the trident, so that he could take her with him, and so the trident is the feminine principle. It's always there. It's always there. Yeah. And I just wanted to finish with just one final little story of Padmasambhava, and this whole thing of what we bow to, what we bow to. And it's a story sort of later on in Padmasambhava's life, when well, they were trying to establish Buddhism in Tibet. The king of Tibet was wanting to establish Buddhism there, and it was a monk called Shantirakshita who was helping with that, and they were building a monastery with all the, all the people were helping, and and they were building this monastery by day, but these beings and ogres and spirits would come at night and take it all down again. So they weren't basically getting anywhere with creating somewhere where people could come, which obviously, the significance of that, and the significance for us, being able to come back into the Buddhist Center, to gather, somewhere to gather. So it's, it's importance. And yeah, this, so the Shantirakshita said, oh, well, I know a man called Padmasambhava who could help us to deal with these beings that are coming in all the time, and these demons, and taking down the monastery. So the king says, well, let's call him, let's get him here. We need his help. So that's, and by this time, Padmasambhava was already, was a very, well, obviously from birth, he was a very, extraordinary being, an accomplished teacher, and, all of that. So, so he comes, Padmasambhava comes, and there is this thing about, if you call on Padmasambhava, he will always come. He's been such an important figure in Tibetan Buddhism, and to this day, the Tibetan people very much Padmasambhava. And I was really struck with just reading this little bit that said, that a scholar called Janet Gatsu refers, because to this day the Tibetan people still long, it was a very fantastic time for them when Padmasambhava was there, and to this day that's been carried on for centuries, and this longing for Padmasambhava to return is still there. So she refers to this, Tibet, there being this culture of longing, which I thought was just very beautiful, this culture of longing for the guru to return. And of course we all know what Tibet has been through, is going through. So to return to my story, so the king meets with Padmasambhava, and the king brings with him, because he's heard of this guy, it's pretty kind of, you never quite know what he's going to do, really, it's this kind of magician type, wizard and all that. So he brings with him his whole sort of army, and entourage, and meets with Padmasambhava. And as the king, approaches Padmasambhava and they stand in front of each other, the king just nods, just little sort of acknowledgement of Padmasambhava, which makes then Padmasambhava kind of think, what do I do? What am I going to do? Am I going to bow in return to this king? So I'm just going to finish with a little verse from the actual canto, but I just want to invite you as part of, the journey today, to reflect on, you know, and particularly at this time, we're in, you know, whatever we're in, I just really don't even know what to call it, you know, but whatever we're in, what is it that you could bow to? What is it you could bow to? So this is Padmasambhava as he meets the king of thoughts. But who are we, he and I, plunged in the darkness in his mind? I am learned in the 5 realms of knowledge, Buddha in a single lifetime, exempt from birth and death. It is out of necessity that he invites me here. Formerly this king bowed down before me. Shall I or shall I not return his bow?